Top reasons that change management initiatives fail. Reasons relating to not being able to lock down change. We won't be able to get anything done. The business doesn't pay us not to make changes, we get paid to make changes. Or reasons relating to the inability to electrify the fence. We don't need to. We trust our own people. Our people are professionals and don't need constant micromanagement. We already have a change management policy in place, and we believe there are no unauthorized changes, but in paren, don't make me bet my bonus on that. I'm Lynn Graves, and my project was about re-engineering the change management process for a large IT shop. This IT shop was approximately 150 employees strong, very large network, and supports thousands of users. But basically there was no leadership enforced policy in place by which changes were implemented and monitored and policed or controlled. Change management versus change announcement. There was a large meeting that took place weekly where changes weren't really vetted in this meeting, they were just merely announced. One of the problems with this particular meeting was that oftentimes the person implementing the change or the change owner would not be present at the meeting and someone else would be announcing it and doesn't have a lot of specific details about the change. Another problem would be a person not at that meeting where there could be a great deal of potential impact from that change, but they wouldn't be in the meeting to know anything about the change. So while that meeting took place every week, it really was not an effective way to talk about and vet changes. Some of the drivers of this whole process was the lack of documentation or necessary documentation that we would need for internal auditing and external auditing. As you can imagine, we had areas that were stellar at their change management process. They documented everything. And we had polar opposite areas that did nothing. So the whole point was to allow people, give them a set of guidelines to answer the same, they're all answering the same questions. Who is requesting the change? What's the justification for the change? What's the risk of implementing or not implementing this change? We just kind of set up a framework so that everybody was answering the same set of questions. Well, you've heard the old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. This was a very busy IT shop. Lots of things going on, but there was no way to actually measure what they were doing on a daily basis. As you can imagine, there were multiple tools that were used, from Excel spreadsheets to fancy databases to somebody's handwritten notes in a notebook. So what we looked at were some metrics, some data collection that we could actually advertise and say, this is the kind of work we're doing. How many routine changes do you have in a 12-month period? How many high-risk changes do you have in a 12-month period? How many emergency changes? That was another big problem in the shop, was emergency changes were defined as, oops, I forgot, or I meant to get that change in, but I need to implement it in the next 24 hours. Suffice it to say, there was no easy way to gather any kind of information specific to these metrics, and there was no way at all to gather it for the entire department, because we did have some who were doing nothing. Well, it was time to electrify the fence. Our executive leadership had more than once had to explain why a mission-critical system went down unexpectedly, or they had to defend comments that their staff was incompetent. So we had a unified approach. We had a core group of people that we brought together from executive leadership, security, regulatory, internal auditing, project management, operations management, infrastructure support management. And we researched, okay, what are other facilities, like facilities, doing to manage their changes? Gartner was ITIL was another big one. This book that I was just reading out of, ITIL, and you know, what's the industry standard, and what are other people doing? So after our research, we drafted a production change management policy by which changes are made, they are monitored, and the whole change process has a way of being policed. We established early on clearly defined best practice change management processes and a common methodology. Improve efficiency through the use of automated tools using a centralized data repository. Improve change management communications through automated escalations and notifications, and being able to produce those metrics. It has been a challenge. You know, change is difficult to affect in any culture, and you know, people using a different process and getting them to think in the same way, and even language. Let's all be using the same language, and defining that language in the same way was very important. In conclusion, as of March of this year, 3/4 of the department has been trained on this process and is using this process. And some of our next steps are to look at these areas where we already had some stellar project management processes in place, and figure out how to incorporate their workflow into the new change management process. But in short, the success of this entire effort has required standards and guidelines that can be applied commonly across the IT shop, the desire to do the right thing, and the diligence to make it happen, and leadership enforced controls and accountability. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you've learned something from it. Thanks.